Maxim here, and I am back again with some more WICSO. Now, it's actually been like a while. I think it's been like 2 months ever since I came back to WICSO, but yet again, I believe that finally, after 2 months of absolutely no ideas, we are back in this series that honestly still has a lot of potential. Now, in the last video, we saw the defeat of Anatolia and Persia. They tried a conquest of Mesopotamia, and we also saw the world beginning to drift towards a more explorationist ideal, especially after the Right Triangle Alliance absolutely wrecked the living shit out of Persia. It's where we also saw the creation of a new state over here in the north of Europe called Belgica. We also saw the complete colonization of Iberia. We then saw I actually have to correct this first, but we then see the Notch Triangle Alliance form between France and Villia, and we also saw the Romans and the Libyans form their own alliance. Nice. Now, if you do go ahead and enjoy this video, make sure you give it a like. Don't forget to subscribe. And again, give me some more suggestions for my WICSO series, because I honestly think that I want to come back. And by the way, thanks to Gold Team Ukraine on top for giving me some ideas. These will definitely help if I want to continue the series. And yes, I do definitely want to continue the series. But now let's go ahead and start things off here in Europe. Moving over here to Europe, Dobruja will be making the first move of this video. Dobruja will begin a conquest of more and more of what is now modern-day Romania. As they will move up, they will, however, eventually run into a dilemma, as they eventually run into somewhere around the Carpathian Mountains. Well, I believe they've already crossed it, but the Carpathian Mountains, like, somewhere right over here. But eventually, the Romanians, or I guess the Dobrujians, won't be able to cross any further. However, though, before they will go ahead and make some last-minute expansions before stopping. Elsewhere in the east, we will actually see something interesting happening. Wanting to remain neutral from the affairs of Europe, a group of people from Bosnia, Albania, and Dobruja will go ahead and form their own federation in the north, and essentially what we have here is the birth of WICSO Hungary. I guess my WICSO Hungary. So Hungary will start off over here in the north, and from there they will begin, just expanding wherever they can generally go. They will go ahead and leave the southern land alone, since they do not want an extremely long border with Dobruja. Speaking of Dobruja, the Hungarians will continue to conquer the center of this basin until they eventually go ahead and reach the border with Austria. Austria, upon hearing of Hungary's existence, will immediately establish friendly diplomatic relations with the country, seeing as the two are just survivalist nations who really want to survive in general. This now only leaves a very large piece of land that the European powers will have to carve up. So let's take a look at what that looks like. So in this peace treaty, we will see the Romans, the Herzegovinans, and the Dobrujians divide this territory up. However, though, as you can see with the Roman claim, it is very, very unfair. And yes, this was a deliberate move made by the Romans. I keep calling them the Romans, but they're not Romans, they're Italians. But anyways, as I was saying, as you can see over here in the treaty, the Italians have done a very unfair job at claiming what piece of land they want. And Herzegovina is not too happy about that. So what we see here is a large dispute between between the Italians and the Herzegovinans, as the Herzegovinans want this piece of land, while the Italians want this piece of land. The two sides, both the Square Alliance and the Arrow Alliance, will immediately get tense, as they recognize that this division of land may not go really well. However, though, nonetheless, the Square Alliance will go ahead and tell the Herzegovins to sit down and go ahead and accept that the Romans will win, and go ahead and accept that the Romans can get all of this. The Herzegovins will understandably be pissed about this, seeing as they are a very small country that really wants to expand, so they will decide to do something instead. they will go ahead and expand their claims up north, deciding to go ahead and deciding that they want as much land from this treaty as much as possible. The Romanians, or I guess the Brugians, will go ahead and the Romanians will go ahead and gladly the Romanians will go ahead and gladly give up this little tract of land in their claim. And now we see the division of what is essentially Voivodina. So Hungary will get all of this, Dobruja will get all of this, Herzegovina will get all of this, and Italy, although they have competing claims from Bosnia, will claim all of this. Well, there's the division of Herzegovina. And there we have the division of Herzegovina. Speaking of Herzegovina, let's go ahead and give Hungary a capital, which won't honestly be too hard. Just do that, 7. And Hungary will go ahead and set up its capital where Buda would be if it was a bit north. So Budapest will be right over there. Moving up to Western Europe, we will see the Belgicans do something not too interesting. They will begin colonizing the island of Great Britain, eventually managing to colonize Anglia and stopping it there. However, though, the Belgicans will continue to fund this expedition, and over time, they will begin colonizing the entirety of the island of Great Britain. Or rather, they will try to colonize the island because because Great Britain, as you all may know, has a pretty interesting geography. They will eventually go ahead and conquer southern Wales, and from there they will begin a slow drive towards the north of the island. It is here where they eventually receive a call from Occitania, however. Occitania, you see, is a little bit jealous of Belgica's large amount of land. And the French wanted to expand up here, however, though, were stopped by the Belgicans just in time. So the French, however, do not really want to go to war with Belgica because that would ruin their reputation. So instead, they decide to do something interesting. They will call upon the Belgicans and tell them that French boots stepped on roughly this piece of land. This piece of land over here was apparently stepped down by French boots. That's what France says. Now, what is this nation called again? Now, Belgica, as you all may know, is a bit of an ambitious nation. However, though, at the same time, because of their ambition, the Belgicans are also naturally quite crafty and therefore pretty careful. So instead, they will go ahead and talk with the leaders of France all the way down over here in a central border town right over here, and they will eventually manage to discuss a peace treaty. Instead of going all the way down to the little border area with Austria, France will go ahead and gain all of this land instead, kind of gaining half of what they want. Nonetheless, the French are happy, and the Belgicans will establish a non-aggression pact with the Kingdom of France. Speaking of the Kingdom of France, Belgica will go ahead and continue its expansion into the Rhineland, going ahead and continuing their expansion into Germany. Austria will do nothing with the Belgicans at the north of their border, seeing as the Belgicans and the Austrians are, they're pretty cool. Speaking of the Belgicans, they will eventually go up north, and from there they will begin to conquer Denmark. They will eventually succeed in taking over the entire peninsula, and from there, Belgica will start to look like a pretty impressive European nation. France is even having thoughts with Villia over going ahead and expanding their alliance to the Belgicans. However, though, France is still kind of wary of their power, so they're not too enthusiastic about that yet, but they are seeing diplomatic potential in Belgica. Moving up over here into Asia, we will see the massive Indian Empire beginning its expansion once again. They will continue their expansion into Burma, eventually snaking down the Burmese coast, and from there they will eventually find the Andaman and Nicobar Islands and colonize the archipelago. From there, they will continue their expansion, eventually reaching down into what would be the area of modern Bangkok and Thailand. Speaking of Thailand, the Vietnamese will begin a conquest, eventually starting to conquer the inner parts of Cambodia. From From there, they will eventually start moving west until they eventually meet the Indians, in which they are friendly with. Remember, the Indians and the East Asians promised to all meet, considering that India was the one who allowed the East Asian countries to even exist. They supplied them during their expedition. So in the peace treaty, we will go ahead and see the division of Burma between the Indian Empire and the Kingdom of Vietnam, which will look something like this. So the Vietnamese will go ahead and take all of this, whilst the Indians will take all of this. And as you can see, India is starting to become a very, very big country. Also, if you wonder why I gave them squiggly borders, well, I kind of am starting to experience, or rather, I am starting to experiment with squiggly borders because I think they honestly look more aesthetically pleasing, more interesting. But anyways, the Indians will go ahead and continue their expansion southward. Hang on. The Indians will go ahead and continue their expansion southward, going up into the Malay Peninsula until they eventually go ahead and reach Singapore. Until they eventually go ahead and reach Malaysia. And from here, we are starting to see India as a bit of an overstretched empire. Not hinting on anything, but looking at this geography, India looks like it may or could collapse if it doesn't really do well enough in maintaining its empire. However, though, at this point, India is still one of the richest countries in the world. They are extremely massive, and they own a lot of good, valuable land. Speaking of valuable land, guess who will go ahead and land in the Philippines? Korea will go ahead and make a landing in the northern part of my home country, and from there they will eventually conquer the northern tip of Luzon. They will then conquer the eastern half of Luzon before eventually establishing a pretty impressive Philippine colony. They will also begin expanding up north as the Koreans will snake around the coast and essentially begin forming, well, kind of the Korean Empire from WICSO. It's not really the Korean Empire from WICSO, but, well, the borders kind of show it. Speaking of Korea, they will go ahead and make landings over here on the Shikoku, on the island of, what is this called? Shokoku or something? And they will also go ahead and colonize this little piece of the main island of Japan. Elsewhere, we will go ahead and see China do a move, as China will go ahead and begin its own expansion eastwards, expanding further and further into the Yellow River Basin. Eventually, China will go ahead and look something like this, expanding massively into East Asia. Speaking of East Asia, let's go ahead and move to Central Asia, where we will see the Volgan country continuing its expansion westward. The Volgans will begin and going ahead and encircling this little lake. I think this is called the Aral Sea, actually. But nonetheless, the Volgans will go ahead and continue their expansion into the Central Asian area, eventually beginning a spearhead to reach towards Lake Baikal. Or I guess, actually, no, it's not called Lake Baikal, it's called Lake Balkhash. But from there, the Volgans will eventually reach the area, and from there, the Volgans will begin to cement themselves in Kazakhstan and Central Asia further and further. They will also begin a move north, beginning to expand the kind of warmer plains of this little area of Russia, which will go ahead and look something like this. Yes, I know that is a huge plot of land, but if you aren't aware by now, I am beginning to speed up world exploration because I really want to get the series going. Which brings us next to one of my friends' personal favorite countries, Ukraine. Or I guess you could call it Mykolaiv, but it's still Ukraine. It is literally in Ukraine. So Ukraine will begin an expansionist movement up north, curious and intending to go ahead and explore basically everything west of their country. You see, whilst Ukraine has a bit of a northern expansionist mindset, they also have a bit of a western expansionist mindset, and are now beginning to wonder what lies in this little part of Europe. So the Ukrainians will slowly begin a campaign, or rather, they will go ahead and send a spearhead to begin the colonization of what is potentially valuable land in Eastern Europe. They will also begin a colonization of more land into central Russia, managing to expand up to this in their frontier. And now we are beginning to see Ukraine as an extremely massive country. This is kind of worrying the Dobrujians in the south, who are beginning to fear the power of the Ukrainian Empire. At this point, Ukraine has practically become the Kievan Rus because they are conquering because they are the kind of first they are kind of the first Eastern European state, and they are kind of taking the place of the Kievan Rus by expanding into Russia and Belarus. Wow, that actually rhymed. However, though, just before the Ukrainians can reach the Baltic Sea, they will go ahead and stop, seeing as Ukraine is a bit worried about overexpansion. I mean, I know I am overexpanding countries massively, but the thing is, most of these lands are empty and stuff like that, and they're also pretty close to the homeland. So yeah. Meanwhile, India is just financially and also politically capable. However, though, that may change in the future episodes. Speaking of future episodes, we will see a new African nation form in Africa. A group of citizens from the Algerian parts of Libya, tired of being under the slave labor of the Libyan Empire, will all set out intending to create a nation state of their own, far away from the Libyan homeland. In fact, there's even talks of going beyond the known world, aka the African continent. At this point, the people of the world roughly only know this as they roughly only know this as this is only like their knowledge of the world overall. So no one really knows what lies down south. However, though, these expeditionaries, in the same typical fashion like the East Asian countries, will decide that are kind of planning that one day, what if they just didn't care? What if in their search for freedom, they managed to find a homeland of their own? So that's exactly what they will do. An expeditionary group here from Algeria will begin trekking across the huge African desert. They will try to blend in with the Valencian colony in the south, and from there they are successful in secretly foraging supplies. From there, they will eventually go ahead and set out on a bunch of boats. They will go ahead and find the Canary Islands. However, though, they will decide to go ahead and expand a little bit more south. They will eventually make some stopovers along the African coast before eventually stopping over in Senegal, and from there they will set out once again westwards over into this area. By the way, they are surviving off the land. And also, this is taking place in the span of years now, so we're now like the 1100s. Not so sure what I said. If I was like in the 1200s last episode, I will have to check on that, but just know that for now, we are now in the 1100s. So eventually, after settling on Cabo Verde, these explorers will begin a massive expedition out west. They will eventually cross upon a storm that will absolutely wreck their fleet. However, though, their boat will eventually keep moving and moving until they eventually go ahead and make a spearhead down here in the coast of Venezuela. And, as I'm sure you all know what's happening, the Venezuelan nation is born. So Venezuela will immediately start off as a small country, and they will just go ahead and settle on the coast for now. They will go ahead and colonize this island, but other than that, Venezuela will remain where they are. And now we officially have our first Native American nation. So congrats, Venezuela, for gaining your independence. A very unlikely independence story. Now, this will make the Libyan team a little bit suspicious because now they're wondering, why is there a sudden underpopulation of Algeria? They will begin to suspect that maybe, just maybe, they ran away. That there were people that ran away to who knows where. And now the Libyans will begin they will begin an aggressive exploration, not colonization, policy. They will begin rapidly moving into the deserts of Africa, intending to search for those lost citizens. And the reason why they want to search for those lost citizens? Well, citizens equals power. That's basically Libya's logic. So Libya will begin a massive expansion into the desert. However, though, just like what we saw with Qatar over here, the people are not too happy about expanding into some apparently useless land. Libya will whoops. Anyways, as I was saying, Libya will go ahead and continue expanding down south, eventually beginning to conquer much of the African desert. But all they find, really, is more desert and nothing more. This is actually making the Italians a little bit wary because they are worried that if Libya goes too far, they will collapse. So they will go ahead and coax the Libyans to stop expanding. The Libyans, although they understandably want to search for those citizens because some of them were actually really important, yes, some aristocrats, surprisingly enough, joined the Venezuelan nation. Well, nation will go ahead and reluctantly listen to the Italians, not the Italian Union. But however, though, the Libyans are very pissed off, seeing as they wanted to arrest those prisoners, and seeing as they wanted to arrest the people who escaped and turn them into martyrs for other nations, essentially warning them of what happens if you go against the Libyan country, or I guess the Libyan nation. However, though, for now, Libya will calm down. Speaking of calming down, now going to Persia. Persia, as you all may know, was absolutely wrecked by the Treaty of, what was that? The Treaty of Baghdad, I think? But yeah, in the last video, the Persians were absolutely annihilated by the Treaty of Baghdad, and they were forced to give up a huge amount of their land, and also their capital was put under threat. Same goes for the Anatolian country over here in the west. They also suffered a lot. And though these two aren't allowed to form an alliance, they will begin to get the world on their side. Persia will begin calling out the hypocrisies of the Triangle Alliance, calling them basically evil colonizers for essentially ruining the Persian nation, even though even though the government that had signed the treaty was actually founded by the government. The oligarchs had tried to escape to Arabia, but they got intercepted and shot down by cannons. And so eventually world sympathy for the Persians will begin moving towards Persia. There will be a lot of world sympathy for Persia, and the world will begin to demand a much more fairer compromise for the Persian nation. Mesopotamia is very much affronted about this, and they will begin calling out that the world likes a bunch of dirty imperialists. The world, however, will not listen, and some will even begin to try and sanction Mesopotamia. Ukraine, for one, will shut down diplomatic relations with Mesopotamia. Reason being, they don't really have a reason to do. They don't really have a reason to do it, but Ukraine will shut down trade with Mesopotamia anyway. Primarily because they actually kind of see some sympathy in Persia, seeing as they were like kind of a new nation that first revolted from Mesopotamia, and then they considered them to have fallen in love with with Mesopotamia, and then until they got tricked. So basically what Ukraine feels for Persia is that they feel like that the Persians were tricked, and they kind of want to help the Persians from their plight, so they're going ahead and giving out their support to Persia. Eventually, with pressure mounting from the international community, the Mesopotamian country will reluctantly give Persia most of their lost land. In addition, Arabia will go ahead and relinquish its little coastal colony over here in the south. However, though, they will also keep the island. Or rather, they will go ahead and give the island to Persia, but it must be demilitarized. And now, this is seen as a massive victory, PR victory, for Persia. Elsewhere, going over to Orange Anatolia, they will unfortunately not receive the same treatment. You see, the Orange Anatolians were basically willing to push their population so far into the Mesopotamian capital that they practically left their country completely abandoned to the increasingly oligarchic country of the Purple Team. This will go ahead and put a stain on their plans to try and gain some PR victory, some PR sympathy like Persia. However, though, nonetheless, this will actually give the world more sympathy for Orange Anatolia to not fall to the purple team. Because if you don't know by now, the purple team is actually starting to implement signs of neo-colonial control or trying to enforce neocolonial control within the Orange Anatolian country. And this is making the world really furious because at this point, they thought that the purple country was becoming a good guy. Turns out they are not. However, though, it turns out they are probably not, considering that they own a large amount of colonies and are also pretty militaristic, if anything. But nonetheless, the Orange Anatolian country will manage to negotiate a deal with Mesopotamia to gain a tiny amount of border towns near the area. Not necessarily anything too extreme, but something a little bit more equal. Armenia will also go ahead and relinquish a tiny strip of land to them, and that's about it. The reason why they're doing this is, well, they kind of just, even though the Orange Anatolian country and Armenia have fought over historical land, Armenia did kind of, Armenia, I believe, Armenia, I believe, does have some citizens along the border, and they feel that maybe the Orange Anatolian country can gain redemption, so they will just give about tiny strips of land. From there,